Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining me today. What we are witnessing in the Middle East right now is nothing short of historic, and not in the way many might expect. The story unfolding between Israel and Yemen is shaking the geopolitical ground beneath our feet. For the first time in modern history, a small, war-torn nation, long underestimated and battered by external aggression, has dealt what could be described as Israel's biggest defeat. And I'm not using that phrase lightly. When Yemen's forces targeted and destroyed a central headquarters of the Israeli Defense Forces, it was not just a military event, it was a symbolic earthquake in global politics and economics. The recent destruction of an Israeli Defense Forces IDF headquarters by Yemeni forces has sent shockwaves through global political and military circles, shaking the very foundation of Israel's long-cultivated image as the Middle East's unchallenged military powerhouse. For decades, Israel has been seen as the region's invincible force, a nation fortified by cutting-edge defense systems, advanced intelligence networks, and unwavering Western support. Yet, this single event, a strike delivered by a nation long written off as impoverished and war-torn, has pierced through that image like a thunderbolt. It isn't just a physical attack on a military facility, it's a symbolic strike at the heart of Israel's strategic prestige and psychological dominance in the region. For years, Israel's military reputation has been built upon precision, deterrence, and an aura of superiority. Its advanced technologies, such as the Iron Dome missile defense system, have been portrayed as impenetrable shields, safeguarding the nation from any external threat. But when Yemen, a country devastated by a brutal war, economic isolation, and humanitarian crises, successfully executed an attack that bypassed Israeli defenses, it shattered that illusion of invulnerability. The message sent was loud and clear. Military supremacy is no longer absolute, and even the most fortified powers can be brought to their knees by strategic ingenuity and determination. Observers around the world have described this as a David versus Goliath moment, one that redefines the balance of power in the Middle East. Yemen's strike was not simply a demonstration of military capability, it was a declaration of defiance, a statement that resourcefulness can outmaneuver wealth and that resilience can outlast technological dominance. In geopolitical terms, this incident marks a significant shift. Israel's deterrence model, long used to discourage its adversaries through overwhelming force, now stands questioned. The psychological advantage that has kept many regional actors at bay appears to be eroding, replaced by a growing confidence among those who once viewed confrontation with Israel as suicidal. What makes this event particularly historic is not just the destruction itself, but the symbolism it carries. Israel's military has always been more than just a defense mechanism. It has been a cornerstone of its national identity, a projection of power and modernity to both allies and adversaries. That identity now faces a crack. For Israel's citizens, the idea that their nation could be touched, even momentarily, by a far weaker opponent introduces an unfamiliar sense of vulnerability. For its adversaries, it serves as inspiration, proof that persistence, strategy, and unity can tilt the scales against even the mightiest of foes. From an international perspective, this strike forces policymakers and analysts to reconsider long-held assumptions about military hierarchies in the Middle East. How could Yemen, under years of blockade and isolation, achieve such precision and impact? How did Israel's vast intelligence and defense apparatus fail to anticipate or intercept it? These questions echo beyond military briefings. They resonate in global markets, diplomatic circles, and think tanks worldwide. The economic implications are equally profound. Investors who once saw Israel as a bastion of stability may now pause, reassessing risks as geopolitical uncertainty deepens. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of this event is its psychological effect. Power, after all, is not merely measured by hardware or budgets, but by perception. The moment the world sees that power falter, even slightly, the narrative begins to shift. Yemen's success, against all odds, has punctured the myth of invincibility that shielded Israel for decades. It has rewritten the rules of engagement and reminded global powers that prestige, once lost, cannot easily be regained. In the theater of modern geopolitics, this strike will be remembered not only as a military episode, but as a defining moment when the world realized that even giants can bleed. The recent confrontation between Yemen and Israel has rewritten the narrative of power in the modern Middle East, marking a defining moment where the underdog dared to defy the global giant and succeeded. Yemen's successful strike against Israel's military infrastructure stunned observers across the world. A nation ravaged by years of war, famine, and blockade, Yemen was never considered a serious military contender on the world stage. Yet in one calculated and devastating move, it exposed the fragility of what many believed to be an unshakable superpower in the region. The story unfolding here is not merely about warfare, it's about the audacity of the underestimated, the rise of the overlooked, and the power of resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. What makes this moment extraordinary is how Yemen managed to turn its adversity into an unexpected form of strength. For years, the country has endured bombings, economic collapse, and international isolation. Its infrastructure lies in ruins, and its people have been trapped in what the United Nations has called one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. Yet beneath the rubble, something profound was building, a determination that transformed despair into defiance. Yemen learned to innovate under pressure, to adapt in scarcity, and to strike when no one thought it could. This is the kind of resilience that history often overlooks until it explodes onto the world stage. Israel, by contrast, represents the pinnacle of technological sophistication and military precision. With its advanced weaponry, vast intelligence networks, and backing from Western powers, it has long been perceived as untouchable. Its military doctrine rests on deterrence, the idea that overwhelming strength would prevent any meaningful challenge. But the Yemeni strike disrupted that logic entirely. It demonstrated that power is not just about resources, it's about resolve. It showed that nations with limited means can exploit the complacency of their more powerful rivals, using agility and unpredictability as their greatest weapons. There is a powerful symbolism at play here, one that transcends borders. Yemen's success resonates with every nation and every people who have ever been silenced by stronger forces. It echoes the age-old lesson that might does not guarantee victory, and that underdogs can shift the balance of history when driven by purpose. The images and reports of the strike reverberated across the Arab world and beyond, igniting a sense of pride and possibility among populations who have long lived under the shadow of domination. It wasn't just a missile hitting a building, it was a message crashing into the walls of global arrogance. Strategically, Yemen's triumph is a wake-up call for the modern era of warfare. It underscores how unconventional tactics, local intelligence, and deep motivation can neutralize even the most advanced defense systems. The asymmetry of this conflict, the small versus the mighty, exposes how traditional models of power are rapidly evolving. In an age where technology is accessible and where desperation fuels innovation, even nations under siege can rewrite the rules of engagement. The idea that only rich militarized states can shape outcomes is crumbling before our eyes. What makes this moment gripping is not only what happened, but Who made it happen? Yemen's story embodies the raw essence of human endurance, a people who refused to bow to despair and instead turned struggle into strategy. It is a narrative that challenges the cynicism of international politics and reminds us that even in the darkest corners of conflict, the will to fight for dignity remains unconquered. Yemen's strike against Israel will be remembered not just as a military maneuver, but as a defining chapter in the story of defiance, proof that in the eternal struggle between oppressor and oppressed, the balance of power can shift when courage meets conviction. The destruction of an Israeli Defense Forces headquarters by Yemeni forces has laid bare a truth that many global powers prefer to ignore. Even the most fortified systems of defense possess cracks, and within those cracks lies the potential for collapse. Israel's military has long been regarded as a symbol of precision, discipline, and technological dominance, a machine so well oiled that few believed it could ever falter. Yet, in a single unexpected strike, Yemen managed to expose a vulnerability that goes far beyond a physical breach. It revealed a strategic weakness embedded in the very foundation of Israel's security doctrine. For decades, Israel's strength has been rooted in deterrence, built on the belief that superior firepower, intelligence, and defense infrastructure would neutralize any threat before it materialized. That confidence has now been shaken, and the world is paying attention. What makes this moment so critical is that it wasn't just a loss of a military target, it was a loss of perception. The belief in Israel's absolute invulnerability has been one of its greatest strategic assets, deterring regional adversaries and assuring its allies of its dominance. But when a smaller, isolated nation like Yemen successfully delivers a blow against the IDF's command structure, it punctures that aura of superiority. Suddenly, Israel's defenses, which once seemed impenetrable, appear fallible. And in geopolitics, perception can be as powerful and as damaging as reality itself. The roots of this exposure lie not only in tactical errors, but in strategic complacency. Israel's defense apparatus has, for years, focused on advanced technology, satellite intelligence, cyber warfare, and missile interception systems, all underpinned by vast Western support. But the Yemeni strike revealed that over-reliance on technology can create a dangerous blind spot. High-tech defense can fail when faced with low-tech ingenuity combined with psychological unpredictability. Yemen's forces, operating under constraints, have developed methods that are unconventional, decentralized, and difficult to anticipate. They turn their limitations into strengths, leveraging the element of surprise in ways that modern defense systems are ill-equipped to counter. This event forces a deeper reflection on the nature of modern warfare itself. The balance of power no longer rests solely on who possesses the most advanced machinery, but on who understands the evolving dynamics of conflict, who can think beyond the algorithm, beyond the radar, beyond the satellite feed. Israel's strategic vulnerability lies in its predictability. When you rely on being the strongest for too long, you stop imagining that you could ever be outsmarted. Yemen shattered that illusion with precision and timing that no amount of intelligence briefings could have fully prepared for. Internationally, the ramifications are immense. Allies who once viewed Israel as a pillar of regional stability are now questioning how such a breach could occur. Adversaries are studying the event closely, searching for weaknesses that could be replicated. The incident underscores an uncomfortable reality. The global military order is changing, and asymmetric warfare, or where small, determined forces challenge massive powers, is becoming the new norm. What once seemed like isolated resistance now appears as a viable threat model. At its core, this is a psychological defeat as much as a tactical one. Israel's image as an unassailable fortress has been dented, and that dent ripples across its defense strategies, diplomatic relations, and internal morale. Power, once doubted, invites challenge. The Yemeni strike did more than destroy a building. It disrupted the rhythm of Israeli dominance and revealed a weakness that can no longer be ignored. In that exposure lies the most dangerous vulnerability of all, the loss of absolute certainty. The destruction of Israel's military headquarters by Yemeni forces has triggered an aftershock that extends far beyond the battlefield, shaking both economic confidence and political stability across the region. Wars are never isolated events. They ripple through markets, alliances, and public consciousness, reshaping the global order in subtle yet profound ways. What makes this particular incident remarkable is the speed and depth with which its consequences have spread. A strike that began as a military confrontation has evolved into an economic and political storm, forcing Israel, its allies, and even its rivals to reevaluate long held assumptions about power, security, and resilience. In the economic arena, the first tremors were felt in the financial markets. Israel's reputation as a hub of innovation and stability has been a cornerstone of its economic strength for decades. The perception of safety has always attracted foreign investment and technological collaboration. But perception is fragile, and in the wake of this attack, investors began to hesitate. When a country famed for its military superiority suffers a direct and successful strike, it sends a message that no fortress is impregnable. That uncertainty alone can rattle markets, cause capital flight, and unsettle economic forecasts. The Israeli shekel experienced pressure, and whispers of risk began circulating in trading rooms from Tel Aviv to New York. The incident reminded the world that even technologically advanced economies can stumble when confidence erodes. This event also has significant implications for the regional energy market and global trade. Yemen's geographical position along the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, a critical maritime passage connecting the Red Sea to the Arabian Sea, grants it a strategic leverage that few have fully appreciated until now. The strike against Israel reasserts Yemen's relevance in geopolitical terms. If instability continues, major shipping routes could be disrupted, forcing global powers to reconsider their dependence on this corridor. A single military action, therefore, reverberates through oil prices, insurance costs, and global supply chains, highlighting the intricate web connecting regional conflicts to global economic health. Politically, the shockwave is even more complex. Israel, accustomed to controlling the narrative of dominance, now faces a credibility crisis. The image of invincibility, a crucial element of its deterrence and diplomatic leverage, has been tarnished. Domestically, the government faces growing scrutiny as citizens question how such an attack could have occurred under the watch of the most sophisticated intelligence network in the Middle East. Public trust, once anchored in the belief that the state could guarantee safety, begins to waver. Opposition figures and analysts alike are seizing on the event to demand accountability, while military officials scramble to restore confidence through promises of swift retaliation and tighter defenses. Beyond Israel, regional powers are recalibrating. For nations long marginalized in Middle Eastern politics, Yemen's action serves as both inspiration and warning. It demonstrates that traditional hierarchies can be challenged, that small nations, through determination and strategy, can alter the regional balance. This shift could embolden resistance movements, strengthen anti-Israel sentiment, and complicate diplomatic relations for Western allies who now find themselves navigating an increasingly unpredictable Middle East. Even in the global political theater, this event has changed conversations. Western governments, particularly those invested in maintaining Israel as a cornerstone ally, now face uncomfortable questions about the limits of their support. Meanwhile, powers like Russia, China, and Iran may interpret this moment as proof that Western backed systems of dominance are weakening. The narrative has shifted. The illusion of absolute control has cracked, replaced by a more volatile, multipolar reality. Ultimately, the economic and political ripples of this event remind the world of a hard truth. Military power cannot shield a nation from the consequences of perception, and prestige, once shaken, reverberates through every institution it once upheld. The battlefield may lie in Israel, but the echo resounds through global markets, foreign ministries, and the corridors of power worldwide. The strike carried out by Yemen against Israel's military headquarters has done more than alter the balance of military power. It has reshaped the moral and psychological landscape of global politics. For decades, the world has operated under an implicit hierarchy of strength, where technological superiority and economic wealth dictated legitimacy. This event has cracked that illusion, revealing a new undercurrent in international relations: the resurgence of moral defiance as a political force. The world is watching a shift where power is no longer measured solely by missiles or markets, but by the courage to resist domination. Yemen's action, viewed through this lens, has transcended warfare and entered the realm of symbolism, a reminder that oppressed nations still possess the ability to challenge empires not only with weapons, but with conviction. The psychological impact of this moment is profound. Israel, long regarded as untouchable, built its identity around security, intelligence, and deterrence. That sense of invulnerability was a key part of its psychological armor, both internally for its citizens and externally for its adversaries. The Yemeni strike shattered that psychological shield. When the supposedly weak confront the mighty and succeed, the mental map of power shifts globally. What was once unthinkable becomes possible. Other nations, movements, and peoples who have endured subjugation or isolation see in Yemen's defiance a reflection of their own struggle. The message reverberates across continents. No force, however dominant, is immune to resistance. This moral transformation also redefines the narrative of legitimacy. In the court of global opinion, Israel's relentless militarism has long been justified by claims of security and self-defense. But now, as images and reports of Yemen's successful retaliation circulate, the moral high ground begins to tilt. Yemen, a nation once dismissed as a failed state, is suddenly perceived through a different lens, not as a victim of circumstance, but as a symbol of endurance. It has become a case study in how prolonged oppression can birth resilience. This reversal of moral optics is not just a regional phenomenon, it's a global recalibration. In capitals from Moscow to Caracas, from Tehran to Ankara, the narrative of defiance gains new traction, empowering voices that have for too long been sidelined by the machinery of Western power. At the heart of this psychological shift is a deeper awakening, a realization that dominance without justice breeds rebellion. The modern world has grown accustomed to a hierarchy where morality is dictated by those with influence, and yet the Yemen-Israel conflict exposes the hypocrisy of that structure. A nation bombarded for years, suffering famine and blockade, managed to strike at a military titan, and in doing so, reignited a moral debate about who truly holds righteousness in times of war. For millions across the global south, this event is not merely geopolitical news, it's emotional vindication. It restores a sense of dignity and agency to those who have lived under the shadow of foreign interference and global inequality. The psychological aftershocks reach even further. Western powers, accustomed to defining the moral boundaries of global affairs, now find themselves on uncertain ground. Their unwavering support for Israel, once seen as a stabilizing factor, now appears increasingly at odds with the rising tide of public consciousness that questions imperial justifications. A generational shift in perception is underway, especially among younger audiences worldwide who no longer accept the old narratives of good versus evil as dictated by the powerful. Yemen's defiance has become more than a military action. It's a psychological declaration that the era of unquestioned dominance is fading. The recent Yemeni strike on Israel's military headquarters stands as a powerful warning to global powers, a reminder that dominance, no matter how absolute it may seem, is never permanent. In an era defined by technological supremacy and economic might, this event has pierced through the illusion of invulnerability that great powers often project. It demonstrates with striking clarity that even nations fortified by alliances, wealth, and weaponry can be brought to a standstill by forces they once dismissed as insignificant. This moment is not merely a regional confrontation. It is a signal sent to the entire world that the age of unquestioned hegemony is eroding, replaced by a new reality where smaller actors wield unexpected influence through strategy, resilience, and conviction. What makes this warning so compelling is its unpredictability. No intelligence forecast, no military briefing, and no diplomatic assessment predicted that Yemen, a country enduring years of blockade, famine, and foreign intervention, would manage to strike at the core of one of the Middle East's most formidable military powers. Yet, against all odds, it did. This unpredictability is what should alarm global powers the most. The traditional systems of control, economic sanctions, advanced surveillance, and global narratives are beginning to lose their grip. The asymmetry of modern warfare, fueled by innovation and desperation, has turned the geopolitical map into unstable terrain where strength alone no longer guarantees survival. The lesson here is stark. Over-reliance on superiority breeds vulnerability. Israel, long confident in its defense systems and Western backing, had come to see deterrence as an unshakable shield. The Yemeni attack shattered that illusion, revealing how complacency within systems of power leads to blind spots. For global superpowers, this incident serves as a mirror reflecting their own potential weaknesses. When power becomes habitual, it stops questioning itself. When dominance is assumed, it ceases to adapt. And that, in today's volatile world, is the first step toward decline. Yemen's strike symbolizes not just an act of defiance, but a broader truth. Those who have nothing left to lose often understand power better than those who have everything to protect. Politically, this serves as a turning point. For decades, the international order has been dictated by a handful of nations whose influence shapes wars, markets, and policies. Yet, as emerging nations grow restless and societies rise in defiance, the moral and political authority of those powers begins to fracture. Yemen's act has exposed a deep frustration simmering beneath the surface of global politics. The resentment of the marginalized, the exhaustion of the exploited, and the awakening of those who refuse to remain silent. It signals a coming shift in how power is perceived and contested. Empires may still control weapons and wealth, but they no longer control belief. And that loss of psychological dominance may prove to be the greatest defeat of all. The implications extend beyond the Middle East. Every capital, from Washington to Beijing, from Moscow to Brussels, has felt the tremor of this event. It is a warning that military alliances, global strategies, and deterrence doctrines must evolve or risk irrelevance. Nations that continue to rely solely on force will find themselves entangled in a world where ideas, persistence, and moral legitimacy become far more dangerous than any missile. The Yemeni strike has shown that true power lies not in what a nation possesses, but in what it can inspire. For global powers that have long ruled through fear and economic leverage, this should be a sobering revelation. The world is changing, not gradually but dramatically, and those who fail to recognize the shifting tide may soon find themselves standing where Israel stands today, powerful, yet suddenly profoundly exposed.